If you think your life is already difficult, there are still places on Earth where simply surviving one day feels almost impossible. There, the air becomes so thin that every breath turns into a challenge, while raging rivers can sweep away everything in just seconds. In some places, entire landscapes are covered in ice and snow all year round, completely cut off from the outside world as if time itself has stopped. Yet even in these extreme conditions, life still finds a way to survive, adapt, and grow in astonishing ways. These are places where altitude, freezing cold, and the raw power of nature constantly push humans to their final limits. Join us as we step into the harshest corners of Earth, where nature will make you question everything you thought you knew about survival. On top of a desert rock tower about 8,202 feet high, Abuna Yamada Gu in Ethiopia turns an ancient church into a test between faith and the abyss. The journey to the church begins by crossing a natural stone bridge about 3 feet wide, with almost no railing or safe handhold. After that unstable entrance, the challenge becomes more intense when religious rules require climbers to remove their shoes, forcing bare feet to touch sandstone that can reach about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. On the almost vertical cliff, climbers must press their bodies against the rock, grip each small hollow with their hands, and stay calm in strong wind. Right before the cave entrance, they still have to edge along a ledge only about 20 inches wide, while a drop of more than 656 feet waits behind them. But beyond that cliff edge, the dark cave opens into frescoes about 1,500 years old that still shine with colour, turning this dangerous place into a rare meeting between faith and time. In the middle of the wide sea, Krakatoa still feels chilling because it once created one of the most violent sounds in modern times. After the old volcanic body was almost torn apart, a new volcanic mass rose from the sea in 1927 and kept growing over time. Before that, the 1883 eruption created tsunami waves up to 130 feet high, sweeping across coastal areas and killing more than 36,000 people. The blast was so powerful that it threw about 5 cubic miles of broken rock and ash into the sky, as if part of the mountain had been blown away. Even harder to believe, pressure waves from the explosion travelled around the Earth several times and were recorded in very distant places. Today, the dry, black rock and empty sea view turn Krakatoa into a natural laboratory where life slowly returns after destruction. In a deep canyon, the salt fields hanging from the cliffs make Yunjing look like a large chessboard beside a fast river. This special scene comes from very hard work, because women have to carry salty water from low ground up to the drying frames every day. Since salty air makes iron nails rust and break quickly, local people cannot build this system in the usual way. Instead, they use wooden pegs and ropes to hold thousands of salt ponds on the steep cliffside. At an altitude of 7,874 feet, strong sunlight and wind blowing through the canyon help the salty water evaporate faster, leaving crystals of salt on the surface. After more than 1,200 years, this handmade salt-making method still exists, showing that people can live and work even in a very harsh place. Hanging on a vertical cliff like a thin, wooden strip in the sky, the Huashan plank walk in China makes every step feel tense. The walking surface is actually only about 12 inches wide, with almost no railing or safety net to protect the body from the open space outside. Beneath that path, the granite mountain rises almost 90 degrees, so people standing on the boards do not see a slope, but a rock wall dropping straight into the abyss. The mental pressure here is so intense that even healthy people can panic, cry or freeze right on the first wooden border. This path was created hundreds of years ago, when ancient monks carved the cliff by hand to find a quiet place far from the life below. The most stressful moment comes when someone approaches from the opposite direction, forcing one person to press against the cliff or lean outward. then place all their trust in the safety hook. Padagadi Fort, India. From a distance, this isolated rock shoots up from the valley like a black fossilized spear, cut away from every surrounding mountain by cold and deep chasms. Hidden in the sheer cliff are tiny carved shelters so cramped that each one seems to fit only a single guard, curled up against the mountain wind. After reaching them, climbers still have to cling to tiny footholds on a rock wall that is almost vertical, then haul themselves over ancient steps worn smooth, with some rising as high as about 2 feet. In truth, Padagad Fort was never built for living, but as a severe military watchtower, raised only to monitor every movement below, like a lighthouse standing on land. Its most frightening gateway is a natural crack about 13 feet long, so narrow that an adult can pass only by squeezing through with stone, pressing in from both sides. And when you finally reach the cramped, flat summit, there is no glory waiting there, only a few rainwater cisterns near the drop and lonely ruins that feel like the last remains of an outpost abandoned by time. Looking like an old strip of cables stretched across a deep abyss, the Hussaini hanging bridge in Pakistan makes anyone who steps onto it feel as if one wrong move could be enough to disappear into the empty space below. The bridge sits more than 8,200 feet above sea level, where thin air can make people tire faster, feel their heartbeat rise, and become dizzy as fear builds. Trapped inside a narrow V-shaped valley, the bridge often faces wind gusts reaching 50 miles per hour, strong enough to keep the whole structure shaking again and again. Right below it's a grey glacier-fed river carrying mud, sand and broken stones, making the open gaps beneath each step feel even more terrifying. The bridge floor is made only of widely spaced wooden planks, forcing people to take long steps over large gaps while gripping the cables tightly with their hands. Cho. The most intense moment comes when wind lifts dust from the riverbed and blocks the view, leaving walkers with no clear sense of the ground, direction, or way out. Under its dreamy name, Fairy Meadows in Pakistan opens into a peaceful meadow lying right under the shadow of the Killer Mountain. Right beneath the grass and peaceful flowers, the ground is actually only a thin cover over old ice and fragile rock that can crack apart. In the middle of this seemingly calm landscape, people can still see avalanches rushing down at speeds of up to about 186 miles per hour, before the roar finally echoes through the whole valley. In front of the meadow, the mountain rises to 26,660 feet, from a base elevation of 10,827 feet, making the wall of ice and rock feel as if it is pressing toward the viewer. That harshness has often been linked to a death rate of about 21%, meaning that for every 5 people who try to climb this mountain, one never returns. To reach the meadow, visitors must ride about 10 miles in an open vehicle along the edge of an unguarded cliff, where one small wheel slip is enough to make the journey extremely dangerous. Nicknamed the Silver Dragon, the Qiantang tidal bore in China rushes inland from the ocean like a powerful living wall of water. Its force reaches a peak on the 18th day of the 8th lunar month, when the tide rises highest and pushes the whole river flow into its most violent state. This phenomenon begins where a bay about 62 miles wide suddenly narrows, forcing a huge mass of seawater to rise and roll strongly into the river. In narrow sections, the water can speed up to nearly 25 miles per hour, so people standing too close have almost no chance to escape. From far away, it first appears as a thin silver line on the horizon, but as it comes closer, the river surface is torn into muddy, cross-shaped waves. Even before the wave arrives, people can feel the ground lightly shaking and hear a long roar like 10,000 horses charging toward them. Mangitungi, India. From a distance, this mountain looks like a gigantic stone gate torn apart in the sky, with two parallel rock towers forming a U shape so rare that it feels almost unreal. The most striking feature is the Ahimsa statue, about 108 feet tall, carved directly into a single mass of rock, and recognized as the tallest religious statue in the Jain faith. Along the sheer slopes, ancient builders also cut deep into the mountain to create man-made caves and dozens of old relief carvings dating back to the 9th century. Because of that, this place is not only one of the holiest pilgrimage sites in Jainism, but also something like a vast open-air museum of stone art. To reach the summit, which rises about 4,367 feet above sea level, visitors must climb around 4,500 winding stone steps pressed against the steep mountainside. What makes it even more astonishing is that more than 30,000 tons of basalt were believed to have been carved and moved by human effort, turning the whole mountain into a monument to faith, patience, and human skill. Stripping away the usual romance of high mountains, Zojila Pass in India pulls travellers onto a narrow road beside the abyss, where thick dust, falling rocks, and one small wheel slip can all turn dangerous. The pass rises to about 11,575 feet, where the thinning air and steep climbs make both engines and human breathing feel heavy. In only about 6 miles, the landscape changes from peaceful valleys to dusty grey rock mountains, where cracked cliffs can send rocks crashing down with almost no warning. In the dry season, heavy trucks grind across the narrow road, creating thick clouds of dust that blur visibility right beside the cliff edge. In the cold season, snowfall of about 49 to 66 feet each year can bury the route under ice and snow for many months. With very few protective barriers, Zojila Pass makes the line between safety and disaster depend on one moment of losing control on a narrow mountain road. Looking as if it had been carved straight out of the cliff, Dankar Gompa in India hangs on sandstone spires right above a drop of about 984 feet. This more than 1,000-year-old structure sits at an altitude of about 12,776 feet, where green life almost disappears and the world becomes bare rock, cold wind, and a dry, bright sky. What feels hard to believe is that the monastery was built mostly from rammed mud, packed earth, and rough wood, with almost no modern concrete or steel supporting it. Around it, sandstone pillars have been worn down by wind and snow over many centuries, creating a dry, brown and grey landscape like the surface of a dead planet. The rock foundation beneath it is being seriously eroded, which once placed the monastery among the 100 most threatened monuments in the world. That fragility makes Dankar Gompa not only a sacred place, but also an ancient wonder, fighting against time right on the edge of a cliff. In Oymyakon, Russia, the cold can lock machines and the ground solid, yet people still live year-round in the coldest settlement on Earth. That harshness reaches its extreme when temperatures once dropped to about minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause serious frostbite on exposed skin in less than 1 minute. Part of the reason comes from its bowl-shaped terrain at about 2,461 feet, where super cold air sinks to the bottom and gets trapped like in a natural cold trap. Because the cold is trapped like that, many cars have to stay running 24 hours a day, or the engine oil can freeze and turn the vehicle into a motionless block of metal. Not only vehicles, even burials become difficult, as people must burn fires for 3 to 4 days to soften the permafrost, which can be as hard as steel. Even modern technology cannot escape it, because a fully charged phone can shut down after only a few minutes outside in the cold. Cut off from the modern world until the late 20th century, the Korowai people in Indonesia once lived in a dark, wet rainforest where paths, sunlight, and the horizon almost disappeared. The air here feels heavy, with humidity reaching 90 to 100%, making sweat, moisture, and the smell of rotting forest cling to the body. Overhead, the tree canopy closes like a giant roof, trapping the space in dark green light and the damp air of the swamp. The idea of a clear path almost does not exist, because every step must push through sinking mud, ancient tree roots, and soft ground that can swallow the leg up to the calf. In that environment, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, forest insects, and decaying ground force people to read every smell, sound, and muddy trace in order to move. For that reason, the high life of the Korowai is not just a strange image, but a way to keep distance from ground that is always wet, dark, and full of danger. From an ancient coral reef under the ocean, Monte Cristallo in northeastern Italy was lifted into a cold stone crown in the Dolomites. After rising to about 10,568 feet, this mountain went through millions of years of storms and freezing weather, causing its easily cracked limestone to lose its softer shape. From that process, the slopes were left with only sharp and bare rock towers, rising through cold clouds like a land where life has almost disappeared. On that harsh stone surface, sunset turns the grey rock into burning orange-red bands, making the whole scene feel even more intense. Not only harsh on the outside, the mountain also holds dark, cold, and damp tunnels inside, once drilled with explosives to escape bombs and gunfire. From that legacy of war, climbers today still hold on to steel cables and iron steps on cliffs close to 90 degrees, where one mistake with the safety clip can be very dangerous. Often called the most desperate city in the world, Norilsk in Russia appears like a giant smelting furnace isolated in freezing cold and toxic smoke. That isolation becomes even heavier because outsiders usually need a special permit before they can enter the city. The foundation of this place was once tied to more than 500,000 forced labour prisoners, many of whom collapsed in their freezing cold while building mines, factories, and concrete apartment blocks. On that industrial base, the smokestacks still operate almost non-stop, releasing more than 2 million tonnes of sulfur dioxide each year and making the air smell heavily of chemicals. In an average temperature of about 14 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold seems to trap dust and toxic fumes, turning white snow into dirty grey layers. Not only does the snow change colour, but some rivers around the industrial zone have also turned dark red from chemical leaks, making Norilsk one of the coldest and most toxic extreme corners on Earth. Unlike many volcanoes that shoot fire into the sky, Gigur in Iceland opens a path straight down into a giant empty magma chamber underground. To witness this scene, visitors must stand inside an open cable lift, suspended by cables, slowly lowered into a dark crater opening about 394 feet deep. Beneath that opening, the underground chamber is so large that it could hold the entire Statue of Liberty without the torch touching the rock ceiling above. Inside that enormous space, rock walls, once heated to about 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit, appear with red bands of iron, yellow sulfur, and green copper. In contrast to its past filled with molten lava, the chamber floor is now cold year-round at about 37 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit and almost completely silent. To protect that fragile space, each lift ride only takes about 4 to 6 people down, turning the journey into the heart of the volcano into a rare meeting with the cooled heart of the Earth. Storseisundet Bridge attracts visitors because of a strange illusion that makes drivers think the road ahead is broken and falling straight into the sea. What makes it more impressive is that the concrete structure sits on old rock, helping it stand strong in a windy sea area. Also, its curves are designed to reduce wind pressure, especially during storms that can reach up to 100 miles per hour. In fact, the 75-foot high arch and the 853-foot road create a short blind spot, leaving drivers with only the sky in front of them for about 2 seconds. Locals also call it the Drunken Bridge because of its uneven design and because it does not follow a normal straight line. Finally, that dangerous look brought the bridge into a high-speed James Bond chase scene in the film No Time to Die. Jianmen Pass, China. In the middle of a massive wall of red sandstone mountains stretching for hundreds of miles, Jianmen Pass appears like a narrow cut only about 164 feet wide, making the whole range seem as if it had been split open. Instead of being striking only because of its height, this place also stands out for its dark, rusty colour because the cliffs are made of red sandstone rather than the usual grey-green mountain rock. That dangerous terrain gave rise to a famous historical story in which about 30,000 defenders held back more than 130,000 attacking soldiers for many months. At the entrance, the cliffs on both sides look flat and almost perfectly parallel, so the scene feels like a giant stone gate accidentally built by nature. This is not just one isolated pass, but a formation of 72 peaks packed tightly together, and from above, they look like 72 stone swords thrusting straight into the sky. The most nerve-wracking moment comes on a glass platform projecting from the cliff at about 3,816 feet above sea level, with no support beneath it, making every step feel as if you are hanging over a deep abyss. The sky above Kiba is not pale blue, like in the lowlands, but turns into a harsh, deep blue because the air is too thin and the moisture almost disappears. In summer, the landscape around the village has almost no vegetation, only reddish-brown rock, ash-grey ground, and cracked dry slopes that look like the surface of Mars. When snowstorms strike, every curve of the land is flattened under thick snow, making even familiar paths disappear after one night. In that cold, rocky world, white houses with dark window frames and flat roofs appear like a man-made oasis clinging tightly to the mountainside. The frightening part is that a person standing in winter sunlight can still get burned by ultraviolet rays, while their fingertips go numb from sub-zero cold. Because of this, Kibber is not only harsh because of its height, but because of the extreme contrast between burning sunlight, deep snow, dry barren rock, and a small village forced to hold itself together among the mountains. Rising above the strong waters of the Southern Ocean, Cape Howie looks like a place where the land was cut off and dropped straight into the sea. When standing near the almost 90-degree cliff edge, viewers see the dark water below and can feel dizzy from the depth and sea wind. To reach this viewpoint, visitors must climb more than 4,000 steep stone steps, so the journey quickly drains their strength. Inside cliffs that rise up to 984 feet is dolerite, a rock formed by magma activity about 185 million years ago. Over time, ocean waves kept cutting into the cliff base, making the rock edge sharper and leaving separate stone columns standing in the water. Because of that, the meeting of vertical rock, dark sea, and white waves makes Cape Howie a coastal view that is very hard to forget. Inside the abandoned apartment blocks of Tixie, snow is carried by the wind through broken windows, covering living rooms and stairways like the inside of an ice cave. The empty rooms are traces of a golden age with nearly 12,000 residents, before more than 70% of the population left and abandoned concrete blocks remained in the Arctic wind. Some buildings were once painted pink, lemon yellow and blue to soften the long dark winter, but the peeling paint now makes the town feel even colder. Along the frozen coastline, rusted cargo ships are trapped in thick ice, their punctured hulls looking like the remains of an old port. When the short summer arrives, ground ice melts into mud and brings thick clouds of Arctic mosquitoes, making even the rare warm period uncomfortable. Beh. Even fresh green vegetables must travel thousands of miles by air and can sometimes cost more than meat, showing how life in Tixi is worn down by cold, isolation, and shortage. Stretching across a giant canyon like an almost invisible strip of glass, the Zhangjiajie Grand Canyon Glass Bridge in China forces anyone who steps onto it to look straight down into the deep drop below. Beneath the bridge are vertical sandstone cliffs shaped by about 380 million years of faulting, erosion, and geological change. To support the weight, the floor is made from 99 tempered glass panels about 2 inches thick, strong enough for about 800 people to stand on at the same time. Although it is technically strong, the glass is so transparent that it tricks the eyes, making the bridge floor seem to disappear in midair. Because the structure is trapped between deep canyon walls, it often faces strong winds compressed through the gap, making every step on the glass feel even more tense. And that visual pressure is so strong that many healthy people still have to close their eyes, lower their bodies, or crawl across some sections in fear. Adrai jungle, India. Even at midday, Adrai jungle stays buried in a cold blue-grey light because its canopy is so dense that almost no sunlight can reach the ground. Under your feet are not only mud, rushing streams and mossy rocks, but also a tangled floor of ancient roots so slippery that one careless step can twist an ankle. Ankle. When the monsoon arrives, the whole mountain turns into a giant water machine, sending down many roaring white waterfalls, including one massive fall with a free drop of more than 1,200 feet. The forest core sits about 2,500 feet above sea level, forming a closed mountain rainforest ecosystem that feels damp, cold, and almost cut off from the outside world. The land is violently broken, so the forest edge does not soften into a slope, but suddenly falls into deep U shaped gorges that are slick and filled with drifting mist. The deeper you go, the more it stops feeling like a normal trek, because rotting fallen trunks, thick fungi, and soaked ground make the whole jungle feel like a dark living world that constantly tests everyone who enters. Vajra Pinnacle, India. Rising out of the mountain like a black fossilized finger, Vajra Pinnacle stands alone against the sky, cut away from the surrounding range by a deep chasm and filled with an eerie presence. What makes it even stranger is that while nearby peaks carry many traces of human building, this stone pillar has no man-made structure at all, as if its harshness defeated every ancient attempt to shape it. To reach the top, climbers cannot use bare hands alone, but must hang their entire body from a specialized rope only about half an inch thick, sometimes suspended in open air with nowhere to rest their feet. The climb becomes even more brutal where the rock bulges outward into overhanging sections because the body can be thrown away from the wall and left hanging completely above the abyss below. It feels even more uncanny when you realise that the vertical pillar rising about 250 feet is actually the hardened plug left inside the throat of an ancient volcano, which is why its surface is almost nothing but cracked dark stone and a few stubborn tufts of grass. That is why the summit offers no broad reward, only a cramped rough platform with just enough room for about 3 to 4 people to huddle beside the edge of a sheer drop. Dalian Mountains, China. Appearing like a giant maze of sharp peaks and deep chasms, the Dalian Mountains are so violently broken that the whole region feels almost impossible for humans to cross. For many generations, people here had to move up and down on ladders to heaven woven from vines and branches and fixed against the cliff face. was even a time when children as young as 6 had to risk their lives on cliffs higher than about 2,500 feet just to reach school. Around them rise peaks above 13,000 feet that plunge sharply into low valleys, creating rock walls that are nearly vertical and extremely dangerous. That isolation helped the core of this region preserve a closed slave society until 1956. Later, to replace that deadly route, people hauled more than 40 tons of steel up the mountain and fixed them into a staircase of 2,556 steps along the cliff, turning the old path into a life-saving feat that still looks terrifying. Sentu Temple, China, rising into the sky like a lonely stone spear about 3,937 feet high. This isolated limestone pillar carries a temple so small and exposed that it feels unsettling even from a distance. To reach it, climbers have to grip rusty iron chains on a rock face that is almost vertical, where a single slip can end everything. Centuries ago, people had to carry every roof tile and timber by hand while crawling across the sheer cliff in order to build it. When thick fog rises and swallows the lower part of the mountain, the temple turns into a haunted-looking box floating above the world, cut off from both gravity and human life below. Becomes even more chilling when you realise that the pillar stands fully exposed to violent wind and lightning, while the cramped summit forces the two-storey structure to push its corners straight out over the abyss. And the most haunting fact of all is that for nearly 2 decades, a 90-year-old woman has quietly remained there to keep its sacred fire alive. Jiading Village, China. Like an island lifted off the earth, this village stands on top of a lonely karst mass more than 3,280 feet high, where human life seems placed in the middle of the sky. Over many generations, nearly 200 families have continued living on that small summit, surviving through farming and livestock raising in a community that feels almost cut off from the outside world. The first people who climbed up here were not searching for beauty, but trying to turn this hard-to-reach rock into a refuge from war and violence. What makes it even stranger is that the village is surrounded by sheer cliffs on three sides, so its terraces and vegetable plots look as if they are growing right on the edge of the abyss. Whenever fog rises and hides the lower mountain, the houses and fields suddenly turn into a settlement floating in the air as if gravity has let go of them. That is why the most haunting thing here is not only the beauty, but the fact that people still built homes, kept fields, and made a real life on a narrow stone summit only a few steps from empty space. Koh Phangan, Thailand. Pressed beneath the shadow of a huge limestone cliff, this village looks like a cluster of houses hanging above the sea. Even though it is surrounded by seawater, there is no natural fresh water beneath it. So daily water must be collected from rain or brought in from the mainland. Life here changes with the tides because when the water pulls back, the thin support posts appear above the mud below the whole village. Nearly the entire settlement stands on stilts over the water and is linked by narrow wooden walkways, so people here live more on the sea than on solid land. More than 200 years ago, Muslim fishing families built this village above the water because they were not allowed to own land. And from a few small homes, it slowly grew into a community of about 1,600 people. Its most unforgettable symbol is the floating football field built by village children from scrap wood after the 1986 World Cup. And that unstable pitch later helped shape a famous youth team. Cheddar Gorge, England, carved open by Ice Age meltwater. This limestone gorge still looks like a giant wound cut deep into the land of England. The mysterious and overwhelming beauty of its underground cave system has even been seen as an inspiration for Helm's Deep in The Lord of the Rings. At the same time, the hollow heart of the mountain, with a steady temperature of about 52 degrees Fahrenheit, Turn this place into a near perfect natural refrigerator for aging the world famous cheese. Above ground, the road along the gorge floor still winds through sharp bends, tightly pressed between two towering walls of rock. Yet far below that stone, an underground river continues to hollow out the mountain, opening deep sinkholes and a vast maze of stalactite caves. That is why this place feels like more than a dramatic landscape, because it is where nature, history, and human imagination all meet inside the same cold world of stone. Shimao Wonderland Intercontinental, China. Instead of rising into the sky, this hotel dives into an abandoned quarry about 290 feet deep, and that upside down idea consumed almost $300 million and 12 years of work. The strangest part is that the final two levels are fully underwater, so the stay continues inside a flooded pit rather than above it. Set against the grey rock is a transparent glass core dropping toward the bottom, looking like an artificial waterfall slicing through the dark empty space. The whole structure has 18 floors, yet only two sight above the rim, while the other 16 cling to the near vertical quarry wall. It is also the first luxury hotel in the world built inside a quarry, and making that idea real meant overcoming 64 major technical challenges and producing 41 patents. That is why more than 5,000 architects, engineers, designers, and workers had to struggle for years to bring this steel and glass mass to life, turning an industrial scar into a luxury stay that still feels deeply unstable. The inverted tower of Quinta da Regaleira, Portugal. Instead of rising above the ground, this structure sinks about 88 feet into the rock like an inverted tower, and it is famous not for holding water, but for being built as a symbolic ceremonial space. At the bottom lies a compass laid over a cross. And from there, underground tunnels carry people deeper through darkness before guiding them back toward the exit, so the whole descent feels like entering and leaving the Earth itself. The farther you go, the smaller the circle of sky above becomes, while the cold air and damp, mossy stone walls make the space feel tighter and more oppressive. Ground. That is why this place feels haunting, not as an ordinary well, but as a stone doorway that forces people to pass through darkness, disorientation, and fear before seeing light again. Basti Bridge, Germany. In the middle of a maze of sandstone towers, the seven-arch stone bridge built in 1851 looks as if it is hanging in the sky, linking steep rock pinnacles with a form that feels both elegant and threatening. For centuries, people have come here as much for the deep view as for the thrill, and nobles once visited this place on purpose to feel fear in front of height and empty space. That feeling grows even stronger because the ruins of a medieval fortress still appear among the thinnest rock spires, giving the whole scene both grandeur and gloom. Gloom. In fact, before the stone bridge of today, people had already dared to build a wooden bridge here in 1824 to connect the rocks, which shows how early this place began pulling visitors in. And once you look down at the drop of more than 636 feet to the river below, it becomes easy to understand why even a few steps on the narrow path can make your head spin. Surrounding everything are sandstone formations carved by water for more than 1 million years, so the bridge feels less like an ordinary structure and more like a path through the skeleton of an ancient stone world. Pravchitska Brana, Czech Republic, is the largest natural sandstone arch in Europe, rising like a giant gateway above the forested borderlands. It once appeared as the entrance to the world of Narnia, which made its already magical look feel even more legendary. Wind and water carved this rock mass over millions of years, leaving only the strongest stone frame standing. The arch rises about 52 feet high, towering like a five-story building above the green woods. Because the structure is fragile, walking across the top has been banned since 1982 to help protect it. Visitors can reach it only on foot, along steep forest trails, because no motor road leads directly to the site. Apatyacha Kadar, India. Wrapped in thick cloud, this cliff looks like the bow of a fossilized ship pushing out toward the edge of the world, which is why adventure lovers have long called it the true balcony of death. Directly below the projecting ledge is a valley that is often buried under white cloud, so anyone standing there almost loses the feeling of still being connected to the ground. The drop from the edge is more than about 3,937 feet, and in that violent swirling wind, even a scream can be pulled upward and turned into a chilling high-pitched sound. Reaching this viewpoint takes about 2 hours of cold rain, mud, and murky stream crossings, making the approach feel like a slow walk toward the edge of empty space. Piotto, Portugal. Perched more than 2,070 feet above sea level on the slopes of the Serra do Sor, this village seems to cling tightly to the mountain itself. Nearly everything here, from the rooftops to the narrow lanes, is built from dark schist, giving the whole place a quiet and mysterious beauty. Beauty! The walls were raised with old dry stone techniques and have remained standing for centuries without mortar. Against those deep, dark tones, the bright blue window frames stand out sharply and give the village its most memorable visual contrast. Because the terrain is so steep, the streets are extremely narrow and are meant only for pedestrians and livestock. When night falls, the lights begin to glow across the slope and make the entire valley look like a giant nativity scene hidden in the forest. Jigoku da ni Monkey Park, Japan. Feels like a quiet world of Zen, where red-faced monkeys sit in deep stillness among white snow and drifting mist. The wild troop here has developed the unusual habit of soaking in onsen to survive the bitter winter cold. Perched at nearly 2,800 feet above sea level, the whole area is often buried under more than 3 feet of snow. No, these sulfur-rich springs do more than provide warmth, because they also help clean the monkeys' bodies and reduce bacteria. Experts have also noted that this bathing habit may help lower their stress hormone levels during winter. Around them, the valley has been shaped for thousands of years by geothermal steam, leaving behind cliffs with strange and jagged forms. Gorky Terrelj, Mongolia, opens into an immense natural world where green steppe meets dramatic mountain ridges and the silence feels almost endless. When night falls, the sky becomes so clear that the light of the Milky Way can cast a faint shadow on the ground. The giant rock formations across the valley began as molten magma deep inside the Earth and hardened about 300 million years ago. Over vast stretches of time, wind and water slowly carve them into strange shapes that resemble ancient animals and forgotten creatures. In the middle of this landscape, round nomadic tents stand like a timeless form of architecture, built to endure storms across the open steppe. This sacred land belongs to the Kentiai Mountains, long believed to be both the birthplace and the hidden resting place of the greatest emperor in Mongolian history. Seen from offshore, El Nido's limestone walls rise like a natural fortress above the blue sea, hiding a dangerous trade behind a peaceful coastal scene. What draws local people into the dark caves is the edible swiftlet nests clinging to the rock ceiling, known as white gold, because they can sell for more than $1,300 per pound. The name El Nido means the nest, tied to the nests that brought Chinese traders across the sea from the 10th century to exchange porcelain and silk for this precious product. To reach them, harvesters must cling to limestone cliffs about 250 million years old, where erosion has carved the surface into countless blade-sharp grooves. Many quiet blue lagoons here are actually the inner parts of ancient caves whose roofs collapsed, while the crystal water comes from sunlight reflecting off a sandy floor rich in calcium carbonate. Behind that tropical beauty are darkness, height, and narrow rock ledges, where the true price of swiftlet nests can be paid with human life. You do not need to look very high to see clouds drifting past rooftops. El Alto sits on a plateau about 13,600 feet above sea level, where the whole city seems pulled close to the sky. Above the rough brick rows is the world's largest public cable car system, where cabins hang between cold wind and layers of cloud instead of underground trains. The city's edge ends suddenly beside a canyon more than 1,300 feet deep, making many neighbourhoods look as if they stand on the border of a landmass cut away. At this height, air pressure drops to about 60% of lowland levels. Water boils at 187 degrees Fahrenheit, and even normal cooking becomes slower. The air has 30 to 40% less oxygen, making newcomers lose their breath easily, while an ultraviolet radiation index above 11 can burn skin in only 10 to 15 minutes. The sky is so dry and clear that cracks on distant ice peaks can be seen from dozens of miles away. But beneath that sharp view is a city always living between altitude, brutal sunlight, and the abyss. Once a strange boat crosses the exclusion zone around North Sentinel, the act is no longer exploration, but something that can threaten both outsiders and the island residents. Because no one is allowed to check directly, the population here is only guessed at 39 to 400 people, making every number uncertain. The danger does not come from the landscape, but from thousands of years of refusing contact and the way the Sentinelese defend their territory with bows, arrows, and spears. In recorded encounters, people moving near the shore can be met with arrows and spears, while one flu or measles virus from outsiders is enough to bring disaster. The killing of American missionary John Allen Chow after he landed illegally in 2018 shows that this boundary is a real rule of survival. Sikane Suniva. The 3-mile exclusion zone created by India both keeps outsiders away from death and protects the Sentinelese from disease, interference, and modern curiosity. Beside the muddy pits of Parakalay, the sound of air compressors is not the noise of a normal worksite, but a sign that someone is breathing through a plastic tube underground to search for gold. Many shelters made from scrap wood and rusted metal sheets stand above hand-dug tunnels, leaving homes and roads under the constant risk of collapse. In this mining method, miners dive into mud pits 33 to 66 feet deep, almost completely blind, and feel for rock with their bare hands. Gold veins here were mined before the 16th century, when gold was once common enough for native ancestors to wear as everyday jewellery. To separate gold from rock, liquid mercury is overused, poisoning the surrounding soil and water, while rivers near the mines turn red-brown from mineral sediment. After 10 hours soaking in mud, they may recover less than 0.04 ounces of gold, enough to keep hope alive, but also enough to pull a human life close to the mouth of the pit. A package trying to find the right doorway in Racina sometimes has to depend on the memory of local residents, because many alleys have no names and many homes have no numbers. The name Rosina originally meant little farm, once tied to vegetable plots on the hill before concrete, stairways and stacked houses covered the mountainside. Almost the entire surface has been replaced by brick, metal roofs and cement, making the inner core about 5 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the green areas around it. Above the steep, deep alleys, electric wires, fibre optic cables and telecommunication lines stretch in tangled layers, making the already narrow space feel even more suffocating. The security situation is complex, with armed gangs and police operations that have sometimes forced schools, shops, and residents to shut down when sudden gunfire breaks out. From a small farm into a cramped concrete mountain, Rocinha shows that dangerous places are not always empty. They can be places where more than 100,000 people still live every day. On the cliff edge of Debray Damo, climbers do not only look up at a leather rope, but at a boundary where one wrong hand movement can send them falling from the rock wall. Because there are no rivers or streams on the summit, monks had to carve deep tanks into the rock core to collect rain, turning water into what decides the monastery's survival. Before reaching the plateau, climbers must cross a cliff almost 49 to 98 feet high, with no road, no steps, and almost no place to correct a mistake. The 6th century monastery sits on a flat mountaintop about 7,270 feet high, cut off from the ground like a religious fortress locked in the air. After more than 1,400 years, Debray Damo still survives because of its cliffs, rare water, and single leather rope path, making every climb feel like a test between faith and the fear of falling. On the Zanskar route, many bends are only 8 to 10 feet wide and have no guardrails, making the wheels crawl near the edge as if moving along the line between life and death. In some sections, the rock ceiling above is only 8 to 12 inches from the vehicle roof, forcing drivers to fold their mirrors and control each small movement to avoid hitting the wall. In winter, temperatures can fall to minus 22 to minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit, while the high canyon walls let sunlight touch the valley floor for only 1 to 2 hours a day. The vehicle can only move a few more feet when the driver keeps the wheels away from the edge, avoids the rock wall, and reads every small change in the weather. Under the dark tree cover inside the swamp canal network, the chilling thing on the island of the Dolls is not a sound, but plastic heads pinned in layers onto tree trunks with rusty wire. The obsession began with Don Julian Santana, who lived here in isolation and hung discarded dolls because he believed the spirit of a drowned young girl was still lingering nearby. Some tree trunks hold 30 to 40 damaged faces, making the landscape look like a silent crowd trapped in the swamp. The ring of water oaks closes tightly overhead and almost blocks the sunlight, keeping the island dark green and gloomy even at noon. Many dolls, made from plastic and rubber, need 400 to 1,000 years to break down slowly leaking microplastics and chemicals into the swamp water. As visitors keep hanging more dolls year after year, the island does not only extend Don Julian's obsession, but also turns fear into a layer of toxic waste piling up on the trees. Miyakojima does not have peaceful white sand beaches, but appears with black basalt shores, sharp lava cliffs, and pale yellow mist covering the sea surface. Schools, shrines, and vehicles, once swallowed by lava, still lie under basalt rock up to 33 feet thick, like the remaining traces of old disasters. From cracks beneath the ground, sulphur gas still leaks out in faint streams, making the landscape feel unsafe even when it looks beautiful. At one time, anyone stepping onto the island had to carry a gas mask at all times because a sudden toxic cloud could turn normal movement into real danger. Even cars, bicycles, and metal window frames are corroded by sulphur gas 3 to 5 times faster than in other places. Because of this place is not only frightening because of the volcano, but because its black rock, toxic mist, and rusting metal all show that life here always comes with risk. A rooftop in Patare can be a yard, a walkway, or the support base for the house above, making the whole settlement feel like an unsafe, stacked system. Red brick homes connect through narrow stairways, black power wires, and temporary paths, forming a living maze with almost no breathing space. Only one large road can separate this slum from glass towers and wealthy districts, making the contrast painfully direct. Buffet Tepu. Tens of thousands of temporary electric cables cut the sky into pieces, while below, small shops, food stalls, and informal clinics still try to keep daily life going. At one point, the murder rate rose above 100 cases per 100,000 people, meaning the danger is not only inside the buildings but also in the power of the streets. Because of this, Petare is not only overcrowded, but an urban maze where people must live among stacked homes, inequality, and everyday risk. In the heart of Kenya's capital, Kibera appears like a giant patchwork wound, where up to 1 million people are forced beneath a sea of rusted metal roofs in less than 1 square mile. The most absurd sight is the National Railway slicing through the slum, while residents still sell goods close to the rails and step back only a few paces when the train rushes toward them. With no real road system, narrow dirt alleys become the only paths to daily life, then turn into garbage-thick mud whenever rain falls. Above their heads, a patched electrical network, with most of the power illegally tapped, leaves exposed leaking wires hanging close to dirty puddles. Compressed into only about 2 square miles, Scampia feels like an urban oven, where summer street temperatures can become 7 to 11 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the surrounding area. The plan to reserve 50% of the area for parks almost collapsed, causing green space to fall below 11 square feet per person and removing the neighbourhood's natural cooling buffer. After the 1980 earthquake, thousands of homeless people moved into the unfinished blocks, turning a planned urban project into a chaotic place of survival. From there, 14 to 15-storey apartment blocks rose close together, forming a strange concrete wall shaped like giant sails. Noted, rusted elevated walkways and rotten staircases crossed over one another, making daily life feel trapped inside a heavy maze. In the end, the government had to use thousands of pounds of explosives to destroy many grey blocks, trying to erase the fortress symbol of the criminal world. Like an urban superorganism compressed inside Mumbai, Dharavi holds about 1 million people in only 1 square mile, with a density 10 times higher than Manhattan. Here, a home is not only a place to live, but also a workshop where toxic plastic recycling and textile production happen right beneath the place where families sleep. When the ground no longer has enough space, life is forced to climb upward, turning shared walls into support points for stacked floors. In a space of only 97 to 151 square feet, for an entire family, every meal, sleeping hour, and working shift must be arranged like a survival schedule. Outside, dark and narrow alleys are thick with the smell of chemicals, fabric dust, and burning plastic, forming a maze where strangers can easily lose their direction. Oh, but behind that torn layer of metal roofs, Dharavi still runs a $1 billion informal economy each year, proving that poverty here does not mean standing still. Standing tall like a living crystal beast, Perita Moreno raises a 197-foot ice wall, stabbing straight into the lake with a cold and haunting beauty. In cycles, this giant ice mass crawls forward and blocks the water, forcing the level to rise 98 feet before blasting through the ice dam with a shaking explosion. Its terrifying power comes from stretching across the lake system, dividing the water into separate regions with a cold boundary full of pressure. Beneath the ice layer, about 558 feet thick, extreme pressure has forced out almost all the air bubbles, making the glacier glow with a freezing turquoise light. On the surface of the glacier looks like a chaotic battlefield with tens of thousands of deep cracks and sharp ice towers like spikes, ready to swallow anything that falls in. Even more frightening, Perito Moreno still silently moves forward about 7 feet every day, a slow journey that almost nothing can stop. Anak Krakatau was born after a disaster that killed 36,000 people. Then it was knocked down by sea waves many times before finally standing firm in 1930. What makes the island dangerous is that its magma chamber sits very shallow beneath the seabed, allowing seawater to enter and create powerful steam explosions. In 2018, this process helped trigger a major landslide, creating a tsunami and cutting the mountain's height from 1,109 feet to 361 feet. After each eruption, the ground changes again with black ash, pumice, hot cracks, and new layers of lava. Volcanic ash does not only cover the island but can also rise high into the sky, threatening aircraft and damaging engines. Even so, on that toxic ground, life slowly returns, showing that nature can begin again in a place that once seemed completely dead. Imagine looking down into a quiet valley and seeing Quandixia village rise like a stone gold ingot on the mountainside. Strangely, it kept its old shape not because it was protected from the beginning, but because it was once too poor and too remote to be modernised. At sunset, the light turns the grey stone gold, while the lower alleys darken fast, making the whole village change colour in just minutes. Once inside, you do not find flat streets, but rough stone lanes, steep steps, and narrow paths shaped by the slope. With more than 400 years of history, the village was once tied to trade routes, merchants, and horse caravans stopping in the mountains. Today, many original families still share the Han surname, but younger people have left, leaving elders to watch over this slow and lonely piece of history. Na Pali Coast, United States. Appearing like the spine of a giant green dragon moving along the edge of the ocean, Na Pali Coast is a wild wall of rock that rain, waves, and time have carved into deep and razor-sharp folds. In winter, walls of water as high as about 40 feet slam into the base of the cliffs, hollow out dark sea caves, and make the whole coast roar like something trapped inside the stone. That fierce, untouched beauty is also why this coastline became a perfect backdrop for Jurassic Park-style imagery, because it still feels almost beyond human control. Along this coastline of about 17 miles, vehicles have almost no way to cross the interior, so no normal paved road has ever truly taken hold in its core. On cliffs that rise at nearly 90 degrees, dense tropical vegetation still clings to bright white waterfalls, so the water does not flow gently, but drops straight from the mountainside into the violent sea below. That is why reaching this sealed-off coast usually means risking a narrow trail or waiting for calmer water, because on rough days, even boat access depends completely on nature's mood. Blurring the line of safety, Hanoi Train Street in Vietnam turns a narrow residential alley into a place where a giant train passes only a few feet from everyday life. That fragile distance makes every flower pot, plastic chair, and coffee table beside the tracks feel tiny in front of the steel mass rushing forward. Because of the sharp curve and blocked visibility, even one obstacle appearing within more than 300 feet ahead can make emergency braking almost impossible. As soon as the train passes, heat from the diesel engine and the smell of machine oil blows strongly into the alley, forcing people nearby to hold their breath against the wall. In a space closed in by houses, awnings, and power lines, the sound of iron wheels grinding on the tracks echoes so hard that the whole alley seems to shake. This collision between industrial steel and everyday life has turned the place into one of the most tense urban corners in the world. Often seen as the real-life model for Silent Hill, Centralia is a ghost town being burned from below by an underground coal fire that started in 1962. Before it was buried in 2020, one road was covered in graffiti, creating the strange sight of bright paint sitting above ground that was still burning underneath. Toxic gas and collapse risks forced residents to leave, while nearly 500 homes and buildings were cleared away. Few people realise the disaster began with a trash fire, then spread underground, affecting about 400 acres and possibly burning for another 250 years. Since 1966, more than 2,000 boreholes have been drilled to track the fire, with some spots once measuring about 1,350 degrees Fahrenheit. In the end, Centralia shows how one small mistake can quietly erase the homes, streets, and memory of an entire town. Ushguli, Georgia. Perched at nearly 6,890 feet above sea level, this settlement looks like a solid stone fortress resisting the passage of time. Because of its dangerous high mountain position, these 1,000-year-old structures were never fully conquered by invaders throughout history. Rising behind the grey stone towers is the highest peak in the country, where permanent glaciers shine through the clouds. The entire area is recognised as a living museum of the feudal age, especially for its rare defensive watchtower system. When winter temperatures fall to about minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, the valley is buried in snow and life becomes a real struggle for survival. With more than 200 ancient towers standing across the valley, the whole landscape creates a mystical architectural scene found almost nowhere else in the world.
Kalyazin Bell Tower, Russia. A surreal vision rises from the middle of the great river, where a solitary spire stands like a magnificent ghost from the past. From a distance, the pure white structure and its glowing golden top make it look like a giant candle set in the middle of the water. That quiet scene exists because the surrounding land was permanently flooded in 1939 after a massive hydroelectric dam was built. When winter arrives, the ice can grow more than 3 feet thick, allowing people to walk directly across the frozen surface to reach it. Few realize that beneath the silt at its base lies a 16-ton bell that has remained silent for nearly a century. It still survives today, partly because it served as a lighthouse, helping guide ships through the waterway even after the old landscape disappeared.
From far away in the evening light, the sharp grass roofs of Ratangaro rise near the coastline like spears, making the ancient village look like a living museum set between salty wind and the ocean. In front of the houses, megalithic tombs sit between stairways and daily living yards, so the living pass through ancestral memory every day. The village is also linked to Pasola, a yearly horseback spear throwing ritual, where hundreds of riders charge across the grassland at 25 to 37 miles per hour and accept injury as part of their belief. Sitting at a narrow river mouth where freshwater meets ocean waves, Ratangaro faces constant wind gusts, salt dust, and moisture covering its thatched roofs all year. The small but tough horses here are not only used for travel, but are also believed to guide the souls of the dead to the next world. So, because of this, Ratangaro is not only striking because of its tall roofs and stone tombs, but also shows how cultural beauty here is always tied to harsh nature, dangerous ritual, and real risk to life. Vargia, Georgia. Once hidden inside solid rock like a city that did not exist, Vardia was created to pull human life into the mountain and hide it from some of the fiercest invasions of its time. But the earthquake of 1283 tore away its outer skin, destroyed much of the structure, and exposed the whole secret body of the city to daylight. Before that disaster, enemies outside would have seen little more than a silent grey cliff, with no clear sign that a living fortress was operating behind the stone. Inside the mountain at more than 4,265 feet above sea level was a 13-level maze with about 6,000 rooms carved straight into the near vertical rock face. In its most dangerous periods, this place could shelter more than 50,000 people inside deep tunnels and dark chambers cut into the mountain. At the foot of the cliff, the river spent centuries cutting the rock into a wall that rises almost at 90 degrees, turning the whole mountain into a natural fortress that was extremely hard to break. In the middle of a wide river, Almirol Castle rises like a stone fortress cut off on a small granite island. Under the red glow of sunset, the tower shadows stretch across the still water, making the fortress feel less violent and almost legendary. The stones used for the walls were taken from the island itself, so the fortress and the rock base share the same colour, as if the castle grew out of the cliff. With no bridge to the mainland, anyone who wants to enter must cross by small boat, making the trip feel like a journey 800 years into the past. In the 12th century, it served as a defensive line for the Knights Templar, with 9 round towers helping reduce blind spots for defenders. What makes Almirall even deeper is that it was rebuilt in 1171 on a much older base, turning it into a stone memory of war, faith, and river power. Hidden on the eastern coast of the United States, the Great Dismal Swamp appears like an ancient swamp forest, both wild and chilling. Behind that silence, venomous snakes and black bears can hide among dark soil, tree roots, and black water, making this place feel like the territory of flesh-eating shadows. In 1763, George Washington once tried to drain the swamp for profit, but the water-soaking ground turned that plan into failure. The most haunting detail is the water, dark like strong tea, pierced by thousands of stone-hard roots, rising upward into a frightening maze. In the past, this swamp once covered more than 1 million acres, but the protected area today is only about 113,000 acres. Its thick forest, deep mud and hard to enter landscape once turned it into a hiding place for many people escaping slavery. Standing where a barren desert crashes into the freezing ocean, Skeleton Coast looks like a deadly edge of the world. Most frightening of all, violent winds keep pushing sand toward the sea by up to 50 feet each year, burying countless shipwrecks as far as 2,640 feet inland. Because of that, the landscape has no sense of peace, only sand walls 300 feet high facing the roaring grey ocean. Top of that, the friction of billions of sand grains can create a roar up to 105 decibels, almost like an aircraft engine. In that furious space, thousands of shipwrecks from past centuries remain trapped, turning the whole coast into a massive maritime graveyard. Finally, this death zone carries a wild paradox, as desert lions have changed their behaviour to hunt seals along the coast. Stretching their bare branches into the sky like upside-down roots, the avenue of the baobabs in Madagascar creates the feeling of prehistoric giants guarding the red earth. For local people, that strange sight also carries a sacred meaning because they believe spirits hide inside the trunks, and fear of curses once helped protect the trees from being cut down. But behind the legend is a more worrying reality. Degraded soil makes it hard for young trees to grow, turning these ancient trunks into the final surviving generation. Their loneliness is also a trace of history, because the baobabs once belonged to a larger forest that humans slowly cleared over many centuries. To survive in that dry land, each trunk rises up to 98 feet tall and swells like a reservoir, storing about 31,700 gallons of water through the dry season. The scene closes with trunks twisted tightly together, told as the vow of lovers who turned into wood to protect the barren land. In the middle of dense forest, Blue Eye stands out like a giant pupil looking upward from deep beneath the ground. Over time, this steady freshwater source has nourished the green ecosystem around it and kept the landscape cool and alive. Even though underground water pushes upward with strong pressure at about 486 gallons per second, the surface above stays calm like a mirror reflecting the forest. The name Siri e Culta comes from that strange shape with a dark blue centre, almost black, surrounded by a bright turquoise ring. Looking closer, the clear water and strong colour shift let viewers see stones, branches and green details deep below the surface. On top of that, divers have gone down to 164 feet, but still have not found the true bottom of this mysterious underground cave system. Vargia, Georgia, once hidden inside solid rock like a city that did not exist, Vargia was created to pull human life into the mountain and hide it from some of the fiercest invasions of its time. But the earthquake of 1283 tore away its outer skin, destroyed much of the structure, and exposed the whole secret body of the city to daylight. Before that disaster, enemies outside would have seen little more than a silent grey cliff, with no clear sign that a living fortress was operating behind the stone. Inside the mountain at more than 4,265 feet above sea level was a 13-level maze with about 6,000 rooms carved straight into the near vertical rock face. In its most dangerous periods, this place could shelter more than 50,000 people inside deep tunnels and dark chambers cut into the mountain. At the foot of the cliff, the river spent centuries cutting the rock into a wall that rises almost at 90 degrees, turning the whole mountain into a natural fortress that was extremely hard to break.